We are Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14, presented by Stakes. We are continuing our preview series of SEC basketball teams. Blake, today we get to the Missouri Tigers, who have had a rough spell the last decade or so, really most of the time since Missouri joined the SEC. The Tigers have not been up to traditional standards. Missouri used to be the program that everybody pointed to and said maybe best team to never make a Final Four. That's probably Tennessee now. But the point is, Missouri has got a long, proud basketball tradition where it was one of the better teams in a great basketball conference in the Big 12. It's just not been Missouri basketball for most of the last decade. But coaching change, talent infusion, things are looking up for the Tigers.
You've been waiting for this one, haven't you?
I have.
I've got something for you here, and I'm going to see if I can make this work. I just want to make sure I can pull this up effectively before we. There's only one way to start this thing off, so let me make sure I can pull this up correctly. So let's see here. Let's see.
Oh no.
Well, Chris, you talk about the infusion of talent coming into this Missouri basketball program, and I think we talk about talents, and we know where I'm going to start here because this is officially the Dennis Gates Power Hour. It has begun, and this is what we start with here to make sure everyone knows. But okay, if you haven't followed this before, obviously I've talked about Dennis Gates a lot. And I said, even before we had coaching changes in the SEC, I'm like, this guy has it. He's going to wind up in the SEC or somewhere soon, and he's just going to do well. Look, everyone knows my thoughts at this point. If you're a Missouri fan watching this, you absolutely know my thoughts because I remember all the tweets that were sent whenever he was hired.
Oh, yeah.
And there were certainly some people on the optimistic side, like myself. There were some people on the pessimistic side, but we will find out, I suppose, who wins this battle. But it's not going to be one this season necessarily. I think this is one where, look, we kind of look at what it's going to take, I think, for them to be able to, all right, let me bring this back to where we need to go. It's going to take more than a year, I think, for him to get them where they want to go. But I think that you look at what he's been able to do in one off season. I mean, we're going to talk about the talent on this roster. He did a really good job of kind of bringing in the pieces that I think will help him win right away. May not be winning a league title, anything like that. May not even be getting to the NCAA tournament. But I think that he has compiled a roster that is way more intriguing once you actually dive into it than maybe people would think just kind of on the surface, because they've got some talented players they brought in there. And like you said from the start, I mean, I think we've always said it. We did this last year at some point, I'm pretty sure, in terms of like ranking the best SEC basketball jobs. And I think this is the one that has just not gotten enough credit because they haven't had a lot of success in recent seasons. But this is still one of the better jobs, one of the better setups, fan bases, basketball wise, in the entire SEC. And I think that's where this is going to be kind of fun to watch and see what Dennis Gates can accomplish there.
By the way, the running joke on our channel is that you are Dennis Gates' agent. So when Missouri fans, when you hear us drop that one in the future, that's your reference point.
It's not official. It's an unofficial statistic, but it kind of is. I've been throwing his name out there for every job available for the past 2 years. So that's probably about right.
Do you want to know the power of Dennis Gates? While you're talking through Dennis Gates, my Apple Music app randomly opened on my desktop. Music was about to start playing, evidently.
I mean, I can pull up another prop here if you want. I mean,
sure.
I can pull up another prop, but I won't go there just yet.
Dennis Gates is so good; he has the power to make music play on our channel without us even doing it. Apparently,
maybe there's a lot of great memes on Twitter with Dennis Gates that I could pull up, but we will hold off on those. But yes, as I said, I think it's a it's a great hire. Again, it's this league, right? We talk about all the coaching turnover. That a lot of good hires in the offseason, but I've said I think this one is right there near the top because I think it just seems like kind of that next step for him as a coach to be able to prove that he is one of the top rising coaches I think in the country, and he's now at a place that wants to win so bad and wants to get back to what Missouri basketball can be. And I think they've got the right guy to do it. Like I said, even though it may not be this year, there may be the ups and downs, and we're going to talk about maybe some of the potential weaknesses of this team. But I think overall they're going to be in a better spot moving forward.
Well, Blake, you look at the roster. I mean, I look at this and it looks to me like an NCAA tournament team. Now, I don't know that Missouri's getting picked there by most people, but the Tigers bring back Kobe Brown, who's probably a top 10 player in the league this year, who was what I think maybe a second or third team All SEC pick a year ago or in that range. They bring in Hodge and Tre Gomillion, who were starters at Cleveland State under Gates. Hodge was really good. 15 and 3 a night, shot 48% from the field. They bring in was Isiaih Mosley the player of the year in the Valley? Or if he wasn't, he was close.
I mean, average 20 points a game. It's just.
And shot 50% from the field.
Yeah.
You rarely see that combination. 90% from the line.
43% from three.
DeAndre Gholston was 14 and 4 at Milwaukee, although the shooting percentages were less than ideal. Nick Honor, who was a big key player at Clemson, averaged 8 points and 2.5 assists a game. Noah Carter from Northern Iowa, 48% shooter from the field, 15 points a game average. Sean East, who was the number one JUCO point guard, and Mohamed Diarra, who was the number one JUCO big man, I think. I mean, I'm looking at this, and you've got a ready-made rotation right there just from those guys, and that presumes that Aidan Shaw doesn't crash the party. I mean, Ronnie DeGray III was a big part of what they did a year ago. Didn't have a great year, but he's a nice piece there. I look at this team, Blake, and sometimes you don't know how those mid-major stats translate, but between what Dennis Gates did at Cleveland State and all these players he's got, it's not just having 5 or 6 guys who can play. It's the depth he's got because you're going to get guys hurt. I look at this and I wonder if maybe people have underestimated them a little bit when they're making their preseason picks. Now, some of that is being in the SEC, which is a brutal league this year, top to bottom. But I think this is a pretty good roster he's got.
Well, and I think that's probably one of the biggest questions going into it is, they've got depth. It's just who's going to play and how much are they going to play? Because they're not going to go 10, 11 deep. I don't think. Now, if they could. I wouldn't be shocked if 10 guys are regularly playing however many minutes per game, whatever your minimum you want to put there as the baseline. But they do have a lot of options, and I think that's a good problem to have here because, like you said, I think there's a clear. I mean, I don't even want to say clear, but I think, and you're talking about in terms of like, what is this team going to lean on? I feel like Kobe Brown, Isiaih Mosley, and I mean, even looking at a guy like Noah Carter, who was so efficient in terms of his scoring, I feel like you've got a pretty good trio of scorers right there. And how they play off of each other. That's an interesting aspect of this. And I think you combine the scoring ability of those 3 guys. I mean, like you said, Kobe Brown, second team All SEC, double guy. I know they talked about wanting to continue to kind of expand his shot a bit. He'll obviously rebound a lot. He'll help him on the defensive side just with his size, 6'8", 250. Mosley, we talked about him. I mean, he's an older guy, kind of like Kobe Brown now, where you've got a couple older guys leading the way. Averaged 20 points a game last year at Missouri State, 43% from 3, made 73s. He can rebound. I think he'll be, to me, he feels like the most versatile offensive player on the roster. But I think, like I said, you could maybe look at continuing to see how Kobe Brown's game evolves too. And then like a Carter, 15 points a game, Northern Iowa. I think he shot like what? I want to say he shot like 59%, something like that. I've got to look up my numbers again here, but I know one of the things I saw in the Blue Ribbon preview, diving a little bit deeper into the shooting percentages, shot 78% at the rim.
Wow.
So like these are the kind of things that if you think about Missouri, right, in recent years, what's been the frustration with them? It's offensively, there have
Lack
just
of
been,
offense.
yeah, it's just been they haven't really had that offensive firepower necessarily. Now, that's not to say again that there haven't been good offensive players, but it's just they haven't maybe had that consistency. Now, I think what's interesting to think about with this team, and this is why I think the initial backlash on Dennis Gates, one for number one, it's because people were just uninformed and they, just kind of looked at it and thought this was Conzo 2.0. But once you dive a little bit deeper, this is going to be, to me, Chris, a really good defensive team. And I know it's like, look, you're coming off the Conzo era where a lot of people are like, well, it was all about defense. I still think defense is going to be a big strength for this team because when you look at the players they have coming in, you talked about Gomillion, former defensive player of the year in the Horizon League. Same with Demoy Hodge. You look at again what Kobe Brown can do with his size, Ronnie DeGray, guys like that, like all these different guys that they have on this roster. For the most part, I feel like are really going to help them, defensively. I mean, even like an Aidan Shaw, I feel like there's a lot of good defensive players here, but the offensive strength I feel like has gone up a little bit. And that's where when you do start, to me, and I'm not trying to leave anybody else out because even a Demoy Hodge can be a streaky scorer, but I mean, he put up, I don't know, like he can score, 25 plus on any given night just because I think he's good enough to do that. Averaged 15 points a game last year at Cleveland State. But I think when you look at where the starting point is offensively, it feels like there's more upside with this team, just given the people they brought in and getting the return of someone like Kobe Brown, who I think can continue to kind of take his offensive game to the next level.
Well, you talk about defense, and I know that's hard to measure statistically, but I do look at blocks and steals a game. You look at some of these guys. Hodge averaged 2.2 steals a game a year ago. Uh, Gomillion was 1.2. Mosley was 1.2. Sean East, the second, was 1.6 in JUCO at John A. Logan, which is one of the premier JUCO programs. I don't always know what to do with JUCO stats. Then you look at blocks. DR blocked 2.4 a game. Aidan Shaw blocked 3.5 in high school for whatever that's worth. I don't know that this is a premier rim protecting team, but it could be a decent one. But I mean, I look at that. You've got Gholston and Honor were just under a steal a game. Judging by the steal numbers, they got some guys who can put out some effort on that end.
Well, and they're going to be aggressive. I mean, they're going to want to force turnovers. I think you're going to see that kind of style Dennis Gates wants to play. Force those turnovers, turn those into easy buckets. Um, I mean, look, his guys are going to defend. I can tell you that, and I know again, if you're a Missouri fan, like you're having you're thinking back, you're like, well, we said the same thing about the previous regime, and it's true, but still, I mean, there's I think a difference here in terms of where things are at, perhaps, but I just look, it is going to be something where they're going to want to play an aggressive type of style. There's going to be a lot of defending, a lot of forcing turnovers. The kind of stuff that does matter, and I mean it's a big part of what they're going to do. And I think with this roster, kind of the pedigree that they have with some of these guys and what they've done defensively at other places. And I think they've got a solid rebounding group with a Kobe Brown probably leading the way there, and even Mosley. I think a pretty good rebounding guy. There's a lot of guys like that. I think on this roster that you feel like this to me feels like one of those rosters where we don't yet know like what the roles are going to be, but you've got a lot of guys who can carve out like you feel like there's a couple guys you can plug into all those different roles that you need. It's just who's going to wind up where. And I think that's kind of one of the luxuries you have with this roster. Um, because I mean, let's talk about offensively too. We go back to that. One of the overall, the offense has been a little bit up and down as we know, but they have not shot the ball well. I'm looking back at the numbers now. I think they finished 230th or lower in 3-point percentage the last 3 seasons. 28% last year. That was 354th nationally. I know we talked about that a lot, but just think about that entire dynamic last year. You're removing one element of the offensive game by shooting
Yeah.
28% from 3. They shot 29.7% a couple years ago. That was 326 nationally. In the middle of that, they had what was it? I think they shot 200. They shot 32.5%, which is again not great. But I think that's something where with this team, I feel like they'll be able to shoot it better because we've talked about some of those offensive percentages and guys that are coming in like a Mosley, a proven guy who can make shots from outside. You've got some efficient offensive players, I think, that can. This will be a better shooting team, I think. Now, where that shooting comes from, maybe it's more effective at making some threes. Maybe it's more effective just of making shots, period, that aren't layups or dunks, or getting to the free throw line. I feel like there's more upside here with this group, just looking at it on paper. So I think that's something else you kind of factor in too when you look at it. I hesitate to say this because we've said this with very high octane offensive teams in the past too, but I don't feel like there's going to be as many of those type of lulls offensively. But a part of that is just kind of seeing how a couple of these guys kind of fit into their new roles, because I think there will be more asked of some of these guys offensively, perhaps than. And again, you're talking about guys who are transferring in too, that are transferring up, right? And we always talk about that. But I think a Mosley, proven scorer, a Noah Carter, all those guys, like I think they're going to be okay.
Well, let me give you some percentages to back you up here. East shot 41% from 3 in JUCO.
By the way,
Mosley
JUCO Player
shot,
of the Year. Let's remember that with Sean East too. I
yeah.
don't think I brought like he's the reigning JUCO Player of the Year. So it's not like you're going out and just grabbing somebody. He can score, and yeah, that's a great point on that.
Weren't he and Diarra the top 2 JUCO recruits or 2 of the top 3?
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Depending on who
Diarra
you
was one of the top. I mean, like I said, East is the reigning JUCO Player of the Year, and I haven't really mentioned him a lot yet, but like he will add a scoring punch, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he shot 41% from 3. Mosley shot 43. Gomillion shot 40 and 52% from the field. You don't often see a guard shoot 52% from the field. And in fact, I had to look that up again as you were talking to make sure I had that right. Hodge shot 48% from the field, 34 from 3. Gholston shot 32% from 3. Honor shot 33. Not great, but enough of a threat that you maybe have to guard it. Carter only shot 30% from 3. DR even shot 30% from 3 for what that's worth. Free throw percentages, because I think this is the thing that gets overlooked, especially in close games. Mosley shot 90% from the line. East shot 89. Carter shot 79. Gholston shot 78. Hodge shot 76. DeGray shot 76. Brown shot 80. I mean, you're in a close game. Who do you foul? Because they can knock them down all over the floor. I mean, but depending on the lineup you've got. Even Diarra, bigs are a lot of times, it's not uncommon to see a good big who's a 50% foul shooter or worse. Diarra shot 71, Blake.
Here's something else you have to factor in close games, and that's what turnovers. I mean, their turnovers, that to me was one of the biggest themes of the previous era. They just turned the ball over too much. And last year, 339th nationally in turnover percentage. The year before, they go 165. And that was, I mean, I guess you go back to that first team, but the year before that, 302nd in turnover percentage, 318, 313. So 4 out of the 5 seasons he was there, they finished 302nd or lower in turnover percentage. I mean, that's what we talk about offensively too, right? It's hard to be efficient offensively if you're turning the ball over. And I think you've got a group here. Again, there's another area I think they will be better in, and probably significantly better in terms of not turning the ball over as much. I feel like that is a big point too. You talk about the free throw shooting, and that I'm glad you brought, because it's more. I study these guys, and I'm like, boy, these guys shoot free throws pretty well. And you keep going down the list, you're like, that guy shot 78% or higher. Like that's a big aspect. But I think it's just that assist to turnover ratio, I don't know exactly, what the numbers were. I haven't really looked back at last year's team or some of those previous teams, but you've got to think that there will be a better setup with this team because I think you've got some guys who are going to force turnovers just with their speed and their athleticism. But I also think you've got more of a group that you feel like maybe a little more comfortable in not turning the ball over as much. And I think that's going to be another big part of their success is can you, just being able to get easier baskets and make your offense easier for you. And I think that's where having a Mosley in the mix is such a big deal, right? Because if you just get the ball in his hands, it feels like there's a lot less of that to have because he's a proven top scorer. I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean, the guy averaged 20 points a game. Um, and you're talking about a guy who can score in a variety of different ways. And I just think that having him on the floor, that helps some of those issues too. And a lot of those things can kind of where you've had those lulls offensively. I feel like just having a guy like that, and like I said, there are some other guys that can be that guy too, whether it is a Kobe Brown, whether it's a Carter. We've seen it before with a Hodge, whether it's maybe a Shawnee's coming in right away and being able to do those kind of things. Um, yeah, like I feel like they have a lot of options. I don't know. I can't say with certainty that, some of these guys aren't going to get left out of the mix, but I just think that having that many options, you can see why I think there's a lot of optimism for them to be able to exceed expectations because when you look at how the roster has been pieced together, and that's something else Dennis Gates. This is where let's say we talk about Eric Musselman, right? His history with transfers and those kind of things. Dennis Gates' history with bringing in transfers and JUCO players, he had a lot of success, being able to develop guys and put them in the right spots at Cleveland State. Missouri is not Cleveland State. The SEC is not the Horizon League, but this is a guy that has a track record going back to Florida State as an assistant of knowing the kind of guys they need to win. And I feel like that he immediately identified that, and you can see that with how this roster has been built.
Who runs the point? I mean, it could be Honor. I'm guessing it's East, but I mean, they got options there.
Well, I mean, I think you're going to start with Honor. I feel like Honor and Gomillion. To me, Gomillion's the one we haven't talked about enough because
Yeah.
he is someone I can remember back. When I was doing the Horizon League preview for Blue Ribbon, I did the preview for Cleveland State several years there, and I can remember talking to Dennis Gates on the phone 5 days after he got that job. Which remember everyone, that's in early August. Like we're talking in early August after he got the job, and he's getting ready to start practice in 2 months or whatever.
Okay,
And I can remember.
rewind. Let's hit the pause there because if people don't know the full backstory, I think that deserves a minute or two.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're a Missouri fan or not a Missouri fan, and you don't know kind of what the story is on that, I mean, let's call it what it is. Like that program was left in an absolute shambles by the
Dennis
previous
Felton ran
regime.
that program through the ground.
It was everyone was gone. Like everyone transferred, everyone had left. They wanted no part of whatever. But Dennis Gates takes over and he has to compile a roster. And quite honestly, he put the nucleus of his roster together. And I am not exaggerating when I say in about a week. He put everything together in a week, 2 weeks, whatever, very short amount of time. And he was able to, again, because of his ties to the JUCO scene from his days at Florida State and being able to get some guys, he just went out and started like I am like just mesmerized as I'm talking to him because you're talking to him 5 days after he's gotten the job and he's already basically filling the roster. And like he's talking about these guys as though they've played for him for 5 years, and like he knows the ins and outs of every single player. Because he has built that relationship. And I think that's why that's why they had so much success is because like they went 11-21 in its first season. But after that, what do? Like they start winning the Horizon League. And that is just like for him to be able to turn that around. Everyone will say it's the Horizon League. And don't worry, I've still got the tweets from everybody saying that, oh, well, it's just the Horizon League. But it's just you cannot measure how bad of shape that program was in, and for him to win a conference anywhere was almost a miracle because it was going to take a lot, and I think that's why his ability to identify players that can win in this era of college basketball. I think that's a very fun thing to think about because you bring in, like I said, a guy like Gomillion, who was one of his. He may have been Chris. He may have been the first guy that he got there, but I can remember it clear as day, like him just gushing over Tre Gomillion and just talking about how like this is our leader. Like I can tell you right now, we just got the guy, but he's the leader of our team. Like he's not even been on the floor. He hasn't even practiced yet, but like I can tell you that he's the leader. And I think that's where having someone like him, we talked about the defensive aspect, there's going to be a level of familiarity there, and I think comfortability with having a Gomillion on the floor, perhaps behind a Nick Honor to start things off with. But yeah, man, I just think that, again, you look at that situation, the guard group to me is so fun to think about because, we've gone up and down the list, right? Whether it's Honor, Gomillion, Hodge, East. I mean, it's just like there's a lot to work with here. And I think that, if you look on like the perimeter and the guys who can play out there, we know that's a Mosley. Um, I don't even think we've talked a lot about DeAndre Gholston yet, the Milwaukee transfer. He'll help them too. I think he started a lot of games. He scored a lot of points. I think he averaged 14, 15 points at Milwaukee last year. So, yeah, man. I mean, this is I think the backcourt is the strength of this team. But I say that in that I just think their perimeter play overall is going to be a lot better. And that starts with the guards like Honor, like Gomillion, East, Hodge, go up and down the line. Like those guys combining with a Mosley, that presents a pretty interesting dynamic, I think, for this group.
I mean, they've got, if you go ones, twos, and threes, they've got Hodge, Gomillion, Mosley, Gholston, Honor, Carter, East. That's 7 guys in that, point guard to small forward. I mean, I know it's different now, but they're more backcourt players, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. That's a lot of depth there, man.
Yeah.
A lot of depth.
And that's where, look, it all starts with the point guard position. And I think, especially on a team like this, where you're trying to get everybody, put together the way you want it over the first look. Missouri, to me, Missouri's going to be a team that over the first month of the season, it's a work in progress. You're still going to be figuring out what your rotation looks like, and it may be longer than that. But I think that when you kind of feel like you have Honor joining the group as a grad transfer with such a high, a positive assist to turnover ratio, which is, again, we talk about that, forcing turnovers, not turning the ball over a lot. That is 2 of the biggest keys for this team. I think for them to be successful, they're going to need both. That is where Honor gives you that. And I feel like him facilitating, to a Mosley, to a Kobe Brown, to a Noah Carter, to a Sean East, to an Aidan Shaw, like Hodge, like that's a pretty, that's exciting to think about. I think the possibilities with having all that in place. And, because realistically, if we look up and down the line, how many double digit scores do they have on this team in terms of guys who can score on a double digit? Now, look, how many of these guys are proven in the SEC? There's one, right? That's Kobe Brown. But
Yeah.
I think, though, when you look at everybody else, like, I don't have a lot of doubt about Sean East being able to score a lot. Like, I don't have a lot of doubt. Isiaih Mosley is a given. Like, I don't even need to mention him. He's going to score. Carter, another one. I think he'll find his way to score. He's been very efficient. And like we said, Hodge is a guy who can score in bursts. Gholston scored a lot at Milwaukee. Like, all these guys. I mean, we don't have to mention the whole roll call every time, but that's where I think, again, you just kind of look at like you said, the makeup of the roster. I feel like there has to be more optimism offensively. Just given the pieces that are in place. And I think that's where, again, to me, that's everything for this team is just not being stuck in kind of, neutral on offense. And I feel like they've just been stuck at times in neutral on offense for a couple of those seasons that they've really struggled. And I feel like there's a lot more potential with this group.
Well, when I watched Kobe Brown, it felt like he was a supporting player having to be the guy, capital T, capital G. And I feel like this influx of talent with Hodge and a lot of these guys who've been alpha dogs at other places sort of allows him to be in more of a supporting role where I think he's probably better cast. Obviously, he can do either. I mean, there were times I think he had a 30-point game last year, but you just don't watch Kobe Brown and feel like, okay, that's a player of the year candidate. No knock on him. He was being the best Kobe Brown he could be, but I feel like, and maybe I'm underselling Kobe Brown here a little bit, I feel like this fits him better. I don't know that the numbers will be as good. I don't know that he'll end up being, second or third team all SEC like you're seeing. In fact, he might have even been first somewhere. I think Lindy's had him somewhere. I don't know that the numbers are going to make him that guy. Yeah, Lindy's did have him first team. But I feel like they're a better team. It's like, I'll give you the comparison in reverse. Jordan Wright at Vandy is going to have to go maybe from being supporting guy with Scottie Pippen Jr. to the guy like Kobe Brown was at Missouri last year for Vandy.
Yeah.
I don't know that he can be that guy. I feel like Kobe Brown established that he could be that guy for Missouri some nights, but Missouri was 12-21. It was kind of a product of the situation. I think now the dynamic with Brown probably changes a good bit.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's like you said, it's a different roster, and I think Mosley is the biggest reason for that.
Yeah.
I think just having that type of guy on the roster frees up, a little bit of that pressure for not just Kobe Brown, but for everybody. And I think that's where I can't even say it enough. Like, I think that's the part you have to keep in mind for this team. And if you're wondering, well, why are people maybe so high on Missouri, or why are people sleeping on Missouri? I think it's the fact that they have that guy on the roster. And I think that, again, to me, that's only going to make a Kobe Brown better, because I think it's going to allow him to be, certainly not have to do everything, where at times last season I felt like that was the only way they were going to win. And I think that the setup is much better for Kobe Brown, in my opinion, just based on what's around him. And I think of how they're going to play too. I think that will be a big help in terms of how they're going to use him. To me, what will be, they know, I think, that he has to be, I still think Kobe Brown has to be an all SEC player if they're going to have a successful season. But I think it's more now looking at it, well, he may not be the only one though, right? Like, you may have a Mosley in that category, which I, again, would not be shocked by that at all. So I think that's a good thing to have, and I feel like that does kind of open up. So I mean, I tell you, Chris, the more I look at this roster, we talk about Kobe Brown
It's
and
good,
Mosley.
man.
Well, that's the thing. As I said earlier, I'm like, I don't know. They're gonna take that thing down to 8 or 9 players. I don't know, because I think they could realistically play comfortably 10 or 11 guys here. um, and I think here's what I'll say. I think the two guys to me, and you could, I mean, in this kind of situation, there's a lot of guys that could fit these categories, but let me just tell you my reasoning for maybe these two guys. I think Gomillion to me is the one of the bigger X factors, because I think that his ability to play that point guard spot, along with honor, I just think that he may wind up being that guy that said, man, you know, it's a good thing they had Tre Gomillion on the roster, because his defensive ability, a guy who can facilitate, he can, like I said, he can defend, kind of that leader on the floor, maybe to get things where they need to go. I feel like he's a big part of it. But I'll tell you this, I think the development of Diarra is going to be one of the biggest keys as
Yeah.
well to their success, because I mean, let's call it, like you said, one of the top JUCO players in the country, a ton of potential. Um, and I think that this team, we talked a lot about the guard play and the wing play, right? And we're like, they're going to be much better on the perimeter. But you said earlier, rim protection, those kind of things. What does that look like for this team? Well, if you can plug in a 6'10" Muhammad Diarra in there and do that on a regular basis, that obviously helps your rim protection significantly. And I think that, to me, is going to be one of the big parts of what they could do here, getting him acclimated to the SEC. I'm very intrigued to see how they are able to do that, because if they can get him playing regularly, and I don't think that means 25 plus minutes a game, but if they have him comfortable enough to where he can help them and give him some of that rim protection, the potential's there. And I don't know if it comes this year, maybe it comes next year. But I think there probably are going to be some instances where being able to plug in a 6'10 guy like that will help some of those defensive things, because I think their guard play defensively is going to be fantastic. Like, I think they're going to be able to defend with Gomillion, with Hodge, these other guys we talked about. I just think that they're going to be. I think they're going to be fine on the perimeter defensively. Like, I think they're going to be kind of that, again, aggressive bulldog type mentality. But I do wonder, what that front court production looks like. Maybe on the defensive side of the floor, because I think offensively they'll be okay. But that is one of the reasons why I would put DR up there is, can they get him SEC ready this season? And if they can, then I think that's a huge boost.
All right, let's talk about the guys we haven't talked about. Kobe's brother, Caleb Brown, about a point and a rebound and a half per game and about 10 minutes a game of playing time. Last year, I would presume he would slide down probably into, 11th, 12th, 13th man type of situation. Ronnie DeGray III played 25 minutes a game a year ago, averaged 8.3 and 4.6, shot 76% from the line, 45% from the field. Nice supporting player, but not really a go-to guy. I think he was a UMass transfer, if I remember correctly. You got Aidan Shaw, who was a top 60 recruit, I think, out of the Kansas City area, averaged 21 and 11 and 3.5 blocks in high school. A couple of additions. I presume these guys are walk-ons. Ben Sternberg, Mayborn Majak from Cleveland State, both of those guys. And I think that's it. I think we've hit everybody. DeGray, I would presume, would have a role in the rotation somewhere. Who are these guys? Shaw would be interesting too. You just don't know what a kid is coming out of high school. And again, they've got a lot of options. Who do you think of that group has a significant role?
Well, I mean, I think Shaw for sure. I think I probably said that earlier. We didn't talk about him maybe in the level of everyone else, but Aidan Shaw is going to play. Like, there's no doubt about that in my mind. I think he's gonna absolutely play. DeGray's an interesting one because I don't know what his role kind of looks like. He's a returner, played in every game last season, I think. Again, another guy who will be able to defend if they need to plug him in those spots. But I'm probably curious to see what his role is on a roster that could be as deep as, like we said, we've talked about going 10 deep here with this group. But yeah, Shaw is going to be part of that mix. I don't have a lot of, questions about that. Gholston will play. Talked about like Caleb Brown and, look, Majok is an interesting one because you're talking about size. I mean, this guy's 7'2", so but he is coming from Cleveland State and
didn't play there much.
Well, that's to say he didn't play many minutes at all. So it's impossible, I feel like, to kind of figure that out. But again, you're probably looking at someone who's going to be more on the just kind of work in progress type scenarios, I would think. But yeah, I mean, I think Shaw. I told you when we were talking about it, I don't know when it was, but I mean, Shaw was just someone that I know Missouri fans just wanted, just wanted to, like, can we just get Aidan Shaw? Like, it was going to be such a huge boost for them to be able to do that and for him to, kind of going back and forth. Do I stay? Do I go? And then he's like, all right, I'm going to commit again to Missouri. Yeah, I just think he's someone I think too. He's got good size, top 60, 70 recruit. Yeah, I think he will help them. I don't think there's any question about that. So, and that's why it goes back to what I said a minute ago. They can go 10 deep. It's just, you mentioned they're going to have injuries and that kind of stuff, but Shaw's going to be kind of fun to watch. And I think his, just very athletic. I gotta say this again, like another guy who's going to help them on the defensive end of the floor. He'll block some shots too, probably. And yeah, so Shaw will have to play for sure.
Okay, before we wrap it up, big games coming up this week in SEC football as we do this late October. We are making some predictions in the Stakes app. That's STAKES. We want to hear if you guys like our picks or don't like them. So go to playwithstakes.com/14. Sign up with Stakes. Place your prediction, whether you're for or against our predictions. Our handle is Southeastern 14. If you use the invite code Southeastern 14, when you sign up, you get a double welcome bonus. Free to play, free to make predictions. It's not a betting app. It's a lot of fun. You can win stuff. What's not to like? So go to Stakes and download that. Help us out, our title sponsor, and have some fun while you're at it. Okay, Blake, you ended your last thought with the thing I was going to go to. What percentage of SEC teams don't have a major injury at some point of the year? I don't know, maybe 20 to 30%.
There's data there somewhere. I don't know what it is, but
yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, what if you were guessing, what would you think it was?
I have no
idea. I look back
I
last year, I think like Kentucky had major injuries, Florida had major injuries, Vanderbilt had major injuries, Tennessee lost a guy. I mean, this is just off the top of my head, right?
It's going to happen. Yeah.
Alabama had some. I mean, point is most teams have them, right? And you say, well, this guy's 10, 11, 12. He's not going to really maybe help much. Well, yeah, if everybody stays healthy, he's not. But guys get hurt. Guys have to slide up. That's the thing that I like about Missouri. I feel like they've got 11 guys who seem to have proven they can play. All 11 aren't going to play some night or play much, but if and when injuries do happen, I feel like this is a roster that is equipped to deal with them. Now, like if you get someone hurt in the front court, that might be a little different. I feel like they're deeper in the back court, but I feel like this is a team that is well suited to absorb something unexpected and undesirable.
Yeah, I mean, look, if Kobe Brown gets hurt, then I think your expectations change significantly because he is someone that has size, and I think his, rebounding ability, those kind of things. But again, we can play that game with every team in the SEC and in the country in terms of having one of their better players go down. But the strength of this team is going to be the guard group, and I think just the perimeter play. I think defensively, they will force turnovers. I don't think they're going to turn the ball over as much. I mean, they can't if they're going to win. Like we talked about the numbers earlier, and the stats are what they are. So I think that's something. I think the offense will be significantly better than what Missouri fans have seen at times in recent seasons. And I just think, again, there are a lot of pieces to work with. And I go back to what I said, like having the offensive skills of an Isiaih Mosley, it's a big thing. Like that was one of the biggest acquisitions of the offseason in the SEC, without a doubt, because I think he just changes a lot about what they can do offensively. And I mean, let's remember this is a guy who's averaged 20 points a game the past 2 seasons and has made a lot of threes last year. I mean, again, so 70 of 164 from 3 last year, 42.7%. Shot 90% from the free throw line. I mean, look, Chris, it's like I'm not gonna say it. I don't want to make that comparison because people are like, oh, Blake's making this comparison, calling this guy the next NBA legend. I'm not gonna do that. But let's just say that when we talk about teams, especially when you get into tournament time, right? Or you're late in the season and you're like, we have to win these games. To me, like now they have that guy with Mosley, where it's like this guy can do it. And I'm not saying no one else can, but I feel like when you look at the numbers suggest that you've got a guy here who can put up a lot of points. He is going to be a top scorer in the league, one of the better scorers, I think. And you're like, oh, well, he's coming up from Missouri State. I've seen him play. He can score. I don't care if he's at Missouri State, Northwest, South, East State. I don't care. Like he's going to score points. And so I think just that addition for me raises the level of what Missouri can be so much, and having the pieces around him, I do. Like, I think there's reasons for optimism if you're a Missouri fan, even though, like I said, I don't think, if they finish eighth or ninth in the SEC or 10th or 11th, I think it's more of a measure of progress versus them being able to turn everything around in one season, because I don't know that that's realistic. So,
Okay, Missouri had 8 guys last year who played at least 25 minutes a game in Division One. Then you add in East, Diarra. I don't know what they played in JUCO. That's hard to find sometimes. Probably it's out there, but I didn't have it in front of me. And then you bring in Aidan Shaw. So that's a lot of guys, man.
yeah.
All right. Well, we are previewing or have previewed all 14 SEC basketball teams for the coming season. Best way to watch those, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. We have our live Wednesday night shows for football. That'll be coming up this week. We're doing this on a Tuesday. So we have those every Wednesday night at 8 Central, 9 Eastern. Thank you for watching Southeastern 14. We'll see you again soon with our next video.